tax day may have just passed, but the instinct to pay less goes back centuries. And when it comes to reducing property taxes, historically people got very creative. In today's video on Homes Explained, we're looking at architecture that found ways around the rules without sacrificing what really matters. So let's start in Paris, because this very distinctive roofline with the super steep slope and the small dormer windows isn't just a design choice. It's one of the clearest examples of architecture working around the rules. The Mansard Roof was named after Francois Mansard, a 17th century French architect who refined and popularised this roof form. It became widespread first in the 1600s and then again during the large-scale redevelopment of Paris in the mid-1800s. And during this time, buildings were often regulated and taxed based on the number of full stories that they had, but the space within the roof didn't count. So instead of stopping at the top floor, builders designed these very steep double-pitched roofs to create a full extra level of living space, and then added dormer windows to bring in the light and make that roof level genuinely usable. From the outside, it reads as a roof, but inside it functions as just another floor, complete with rooms and windows. And it's a strategy that hasn't really gone away, just evolved, because you'll still see in modern designs the use of the roof line to gain additional interior space in ways that don't register as a full additional level. But not every tax workaround was about adding something. Sometimes it was about taking something away. And in England, from 1696 all the way through to 1851, there was a window tax. So instead of taxing income, the government taxed properties based on how many windows there were, the assumption being that the more windows meant the property was larger and wealthier. On paper, it was simple, but in practice, it changed the way buildings looked, because rather than paying more tax, homeowners and landlords began blocking up windows, and multiple entire openings were bricked up, leaving behind just the outline of what used to be. And you can still see it today in older Georgian terraces where whole rows of windows have been bricked up or look slightly off. It meant darker interiors, less ventilation, and in many cases, significantly worse living conditions, though on the plus side, it did reduce the tax bill. Over time, the impact became hard to ignore. Poor light and ventilation were linked to health issues, and the tax grew very unpopular, and it was repealed in 1851. And what's left behind is a visible record of how a simple rule reshaped the way people lived. And if you've heard the phrase daylight robbery, there's a strong possibility it comes from this window tax. There's no actual clear evidence to relate it, but it's easy to see why the connection stuck. But sometimes skirting the tax laws wasn't about adding or removing anything. It was more about how the space was placed. In medieval England, taxes were based on the footprint of the ground floor. So essentially the amount of land a building occupied at street level. So builders got creative. Instead of expanding outward at the base, they kept the ground floor relatively narrow and extended the upper floors out over the street, which was called jettying. Now, it didn't create a huge amount of space all at once, but across multiple floors, it did add up, especially on narrow plots where every inch mattered. But as cities became more regulated with concerns about fire risk, super narrow streets, as well as changing construction methods, this kind of overhang gradually fell out of favour. And what's left is a great example of working around the rules. The space is still there, it's literally just shifted. In some cases, the tax rule didn't just determine a detail, it affected the whole shape of the building and the city. In Amsterdam, during the Dutch Golden Age of the 17th century, properties along the canal were taxed based on the width of their frontage, which was the most valuable part of the plot. So instead of widening the frontage, the buildings were designed to stay narrow and extend upward and backward. And the result is those famously slim canal houses, sometimes just a few feet across at the front, but stretching deep into the plot and climbing several stories. It was a way of minimising what was being measured while maximising the usable space behind it. But it didn't just influence proportions, it changed how people lived inside these canal homes. For example, staircases became steeper and tighter, and moving furniture through them was so difficult that many furniture items were lifted through the windows, which is why many of these homes still have that signature feature of the hoist at the top of the house. What looks like a stylistic quirk is really a direct response to how the buildings were being assessed. Of course, over time in Amsterdam, the way the properties were taxed changed, but by then the city was already set. The plots were fixed, the buildings were built, and later preservation rules even kept those narrow proportions in place. Not every example of tax influencing design was obvious. In colonial New England, particularly in the late 17th and early 18th century, homes were taxed in ways that made full two-storey homes more expensive. So rather than extending homes upwards in a clear second story, builders extended the roofline back in a long, continuous slope. This created additional living space without it presenting as a full extra level. And this is what gives the Saltbox its distinctive asymmetrical profile, 2 stories at the front and a long sloping roof at the back. It appears modest and contained from the street, but inside provides much more usable space than you might expect. As building practices became more standardised and taxation methods shifted, this approach gradually fell out of favour. But by then, the form of the Saltbox had already taken hold, becoming a defining feature of colonial New England. And finally, England didn't stop at taxing windows, because from 1662 to 1689, there was a hearth tax where homes were assessed based on the number of fireplaces or hearths they had. The idea being, same as the window tax, that the more hearths suggested the larger, wealthier the home. But fireplaces weren't optional. They were essential for cooking and heating, so it wasn't something people could easily remove to avoid paying the tax. Instead, it began to influence how homes were designed and used. In the more modest properties, homeowners often limited the number of active fireplaces, sometimes leaving rooms unheated to avoid the additional taxes, while in larger homes, multiple flues were often combined into a single chimney stack. So this consolidated what was being counted while still allowing the house to function and without sacrificing any essential heat. At the other end of the spectrum, some wealthy properties did the opposite, building multiple tall, elaborate chimney stacks as a visible sign of their wealth and status. Across all these examples, the pattern is fairly clear. The rules may have changed, but the buildings didn't. What started as a way to reduce a tax bill ended up defining entire streets, cities, and styles that we still recognise today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you got your taxes in on time, and don't forget to join me next week for more Homes Explained.